Hey guys, how's it going? My name's Daniel Hourigan and I'm the head of effects at CG Spectrum. Welcome to another edition of CGS Live, VFX special. Happy Monday, happy Sunday, wherever you are in the world. I'm coming to you possibly a little bit earlier if you're in the Northern Hemisphere. I've just gone into daylight savings, so it's an hour earlier now than it was before. For you all, not for me. Hopefully it works for some people, I guess, until daylight savings kicks in wherever you might be, if you have daylight savings. In any case, hey Alan, how you going? I'm good, thanks. How are you? I had a good weekend. Playing in the garden. It's quite sunny here, it's nice. I'm going to keep going this week on our Kitbash project that I've been working on. And I had a bit of a play after the stream last week just to see if I could fix some of the issues that I was getting with the cloth. One thing that I did was to increase the amount of fragments. I think I mentioned that I was thinking about doing this. So all the way back up here, the edge fracture, I upped it. I think it was at 10. I upped it to 30. And what it has resulted in is a kind of much more shredded look to this cloth, but it did fix some of the issues that I was getting in terms of stretching. I'm still getting some. You can see here there's a really weird polygon that's just getting huge, and these ones that are stretching, you can see it's when they get caught in the collision object, and then eventually they kind of settle and relax. But yeah, it's not ideal. It's kind of one of those things that I'll have to play with in terms of the vellum settings. I experimented with different substeps and constraint iterations too, although that didn't really seem to help a great deal. But fracturing it a little more, and I think also changing the constraint breaking threshold. You can see there I divided up by 4. I think maybe that's what I did. I think that helped as well, getting the breaking a little earlier. So yeah, I'm going to keep going with this week. I don't really know what I'm going to do. I kind of want to do something a bit more interesting, but if anyone has any ideas of what they would like me to do to this thing, I mean, hey Rizwan, there's plenty more asset parts to this that we haven't touched yet. But if anyone has any ideas of what we could do to this, let's zoom in. Here we go. Barrel rings. Let's see what else we've got. We've got some rocks, that's pretty boring. Ceramics, I guess we could fracture those. Still not terribly interesting. Baskets, bread, rope. It might be interesting to do something with the rope and see, if we can get these tethers to hold. Could be interesting to play with. And then hey, cool. Watching past streams. Yeah, look, there's some good stuff in there. Not to not to toot my own horn or anything, but it's a good reference. There's a lot of good projects in there, and a lot of good techniques shown over the past however many months that I've been doing this now. So that's cool. Glad you went back through it. When people ask me questions, I tend to go, hey, I did this in a stream. Check it out. Have you got any ideas, Alan? What do you think I should do? Hey, Rizwan, yeah, I did see your channel. Doesn't look like you update it very often. I was hoping to see your land speeder that you were talking about a while ago. Let's see. What I'm kind of imagining with this now, like just to do something different, is to try and get some fire or something interesting. A student actually at CG Spectrum has been working on this as well, following the stream and doing his own thing. And he started filling a barrel with water, which I think is an interesting kind of idea as well. Hey Trash Art, how's it going? That's alright. So yeah, I think filling a barrel with something is a good idea. We could do fluids, or we could do like grains or something might be kind of cool. We could fill a crate. Oh, that's right. I was going to fill a crate with chickens. Hey, good luck, Focus. I can't tell who you are by your YouTube handle, but if I know who you are, please let me know. But finally. No, I haven't subscribed, Ruswan, because it doesn't look like you update it. But if you're planning on updating, then I might check it out. I don't tend to subscribe to YouTube channels, to be honest. I don't use it enough to to warrant subscribing to things. But if you ever update it, let me know. Happy to check it out. I thought some of your animations were quite funny, or like they had good narrative, Hey Mohammed, how's it going? So, hey Amar. Alright. I don't know if this is gonna work, but I'm gonna see if I have any chickens to put in this thing. It might not work, but let's give it a go. I have here this where is it? Zoo. Truebone Zoo. Chicken. Chicken egg laying. Doesn't look like I have a chicken flying. Hey, thanks Mohammed. Thanks for saying that. Thanks for joining me. I'm glad they are useful to you. Let's see what this chicken can do. So we've got chicken egg laying. That probably isn't useful. Chicken pecking. And then we've got walk. I was hoping that I might have a flying chicken animation in here, but it doesn't look like I do. Let's see what else we have. There's so many things in this pack. It's great. We've got bird. Or maybe we could fill it with birds. Let's see what sort of bird it is. Oh, it's like looks a bit like a crow. Bird flying fast. Let's try that one. I think it's gonna be difficult, but it could be kind of funny to see. Let's see what else we've got in here. Oh, we've got a seagull as well. But that's just a seagull. Bird takeoff. Oops. Interesting. Yeah, Rizwan. Next time let me know when you've uploaded that. How long do you think you have left to go on it? Fly slow, fly loop. Let's try fly loop. Alright, that might be interesting. I think it's kind of too big, maybe, the bird, to go in a box. But let's see. So what I want is one of these boxes, I guess. So we got this one. Here's our boxes here. So I'm gonna go null out RBD crates, and then I'm gonna merge that in over here. We're in the final stages. Okay, cool. Well, let me know when you upload it, and I'll be sure to check it out. Have you done any effects? Have you got like jets or something coming out the back? I always thought the kind of heat haze that came from the bottom of the land speeder in the original Star Wars was cool. Our RBD crates, here we go. And here's our little bird. I have strong doubts about this working, but yeah, I'll try it out. Now I'm going to, this bird is kind of in the air, so what I'm going to do, actually, before I scale it up, is to move Centroid to origin, actually. I'll, well, let's see if I can do it here. Let's do convert to in-place animation, locomotion node. And there should be like a locomotion node or something in here that we can use to constrain it to the world. Let's choose hips and see if that works. Oh, it didn't really seem to do it. Guess I'll do this. I'll just manually kind of position it. Maybe if I... No. I'm just going to transform him manually. What I want is him to be sort of his body of the bird. I don't know if it's a he. To be basically in the center of the world, so that if I instance this object onto something, its center is going to be based around there. So what I'm thinking is that I might instance this onto some points. Yeah, exploding feathers. Great idea. Great idea. Exploding birds. Why not? Transform. Hope you put an Arabic translation. Well, somebody asked me about translation in the comment, or in the, yeah, in the comments, for Vietnamese, and I noticed that you can do auto-translate for YouTube. So you could try that if you wanted Arabic translation. You might be able to do that. I don't have it open at the moment, but if you turn on closed captioning to get the subtitles to come up and then go to settings, there's a function for auto-translate, and you may be able to do it through there under the YouTube video. I don't know about live, but certainly on the replay, maybe that would work. Okay, so let's have a look at this. So we've got our bird, we've got our crates. Let's have a look at our crate animation. Here it is. So our crate animation still actually needs a little bit of fixing. But we've got this big box here, and that could be the one that we maybe turn into the box of birds. So I'm going to just come to top view. I think it's this one here, and select it. Like this. Let's just check. Yeah. Delete. Delete and unselected. Yeah, I mean, maybe it doesn't have to have... Maybe it's not full of birds. Maybe it just has one bird or like a couple of birds in it. So it's not too difficult. So we've got this motion. There it is, going that way. We want to put some birds inside that. So one thing that I was kind of thinking was, you know, perhaps you put an object inside the box. Like this. And use that as a kind of distribution object. So maybe from there I'd do a points from volume and scale it right up, and then maybe jitter. So we've got kind of a few points floating inside that sphere. And then if I did a copy to points from target points, required geometry to copy, you can see that, you know, now I have some birds inside of here, and they're all kind of flying at the moment, flying very slowly and facing the wrong way, and not, you know, they're not colliding with the box, but that's kind of okay. So with these points, what I could do is maybe let's put in a pop network, and instead of scatter on surfaces, we'll use all points, and then maybe what I'll do is get this timed right so that we emit birds kind of maybe on frame 23. So I'll just say birth $F equals 23. Let's see if that works. So go back to the very start. It must be equals. There we go. So 0, and then we go through, and we get some particles emitted on frame 23, but then that should turn off on frame 24. So it goes on for one frame, so we get just those points that we want, and then we get nothing after that. And then we'll bring in our crates as a static object. So let's bring in our static object, merge, sop path. Okay, so we need to create a collider now. So let's go make sure that this has velocity at this point. And it does. So we'll go out geo. So we need the geometry first, and then we need a volume representation of that geometry. Hey Keegan, how's it going? I'm great, how are you? And we need a volume representation for the collision sort of generation. So out VDB or out collision VDB. You've been watching the replay today. I caught the live stream. Yeah, it's well, I guess it's earlier today because I'm in daylight savings now. So it would be 1 hour earlier for you, right? VDB from polygons. Okay, so collision VDB. I'll call this collision geo to be consistent. So that's usually what we need. We just need geometry. Make sure it's not packed. And a volume. And then in here, we're going to load in the geometry into the sop path. Out collision geo. Use deforming because it's animating. Reevaluate to interpolate geometry. That will be useful if we have any substeps. And then under collisions, under RBD bullets, RBD solver, that's the one that we use for pops. Turn on the collision guide. You can see we get something with the ray intersect method. Oh, it looks like my viewport's broken. So I'm just going to open a new one. There we go. So there's a collision, but you can see it looks pretty bad. It's got a lot of holes in it. You can up the divisions, but this method can be quite slow. So we use volume sample and proxy volume to sample the collision VDB, and then we get a perfect collision shape. It's much more efficient, and then this uniform divisions does nothing. It's much more efficient to do that than to use any of the other modes. Turn off the collision guide because that is slow to display, and then let's see what happens to our particles. Oh. So we'll just hide this so we can see what's going on. So on frame 23 they get created, and then they should get pushed around, but they might not. Let's see. Oh, use that one. I think perhaps the substeps maybe are not enough to have that collision actually do something, because really those particles should kind of collide with that box. So let's increase substeps and see if that helps. We don't actually need to start so early. I might just start this at frame. Oh, let's. I might start this at frame 22, just one frame earlier. Okay. All right, let's try that again. See if we get any particles moving. Oh, maybe. Let's hide this. Hey, look at that. There's some particles moving. Great. So that's a good start. Let's now put a ground plane down as well. So we don't want these to... Hey Rizwan, I mean, as part of CG Spectrum, I work in a team. It's a team of people and lots of mentors and administration stuff behind the scenes that keep everything working. But at the moment, you know, when I'm working in Houdini, I'm pretty much working by myself, and certainly, yeah, to create the things that I'm doing here, I just do this by myself. But when I'm working on films, I'm part of a really large team, you know, hundreds of people. Sometimes, and you couldn't do that kind of work without a really large team. So I'm thinking of adding a force to get those birds to fly in some fashion. But I might leave it off for now and just see what happens with these particles now. So yeah, two of them still aren't colliding, but if I give them a force, they'll fly away. But these ones are kind of getting all caught up in the chaos. But there's one there. Oh look, he's traveling up. So you know, you can imagine what will happen. What we're going to get out of here is particles. Well, at the moment we're getting our collision too. So let's do star pop star, just to get the particles. So when you have star in there, it brings out the collision objects as well, but you only want the particles. So I'm just basically I'm wildcarding pop. I'm just grabbing this object, the pop object. That's really the only thing that you want to come out of here. So you could type that as well. So we just want the particles coming out, and then you can see when I copy my birds. Yeah, that's all right, Rizwan. I get it. You know, it's time-consuming stuff when you work by yourself, certainly. I think it's good to post updates though, you know, even if it's not finished. It's sometimes good to post work in progress. So, you know, it's not perfect yet, but you can see what's happening when I copy those birds onto those points. They're moving along with it. And it doesn't look great at the moment, but we'll try and make it better. Alright, so then now one thing that's going to be difficult with this method is the fact that these are just instanced birds onto points. So, you know, they're not colliding with the boxes, which I'm hoping in the chaos of what's happening is going to be okay. Now you can see the orientation of these birds is it's a little bit wacky, and I did rotate them, I think, maybe not. That's right. So I'm going to rotate them because they're not facing the right way for a start, but you can see when they're oriented on these points, they're actually they're sideways, whereas they should actually be, their beak should be we want their beak to align to the velocity direction. So if I turn on a velocity marker, that should be the way that they're facing. The reason they're not facing that way is because of the way that they're rotated to begin with. They're oriented down X, but when you want something to be oriented along an attribute like V or N, you need the object to point down the positive Z direction. So if I rotate this 90 degrees, minus 90, now its beak is pointing to the Z, positive Z. You can see the gnomon down here, positive Z is that way. Now they should, look at that. Now they're orienting along the velocity direction, and that, when they're attached to the particles, makes it actually look like they're flying in the right direction. So that looks a lot better. These guys, they're not actually moving, they haven't registered a velocity, so they're just stuck in that orientation. But if we give them now a little bit of noise, amplitude, and a bit of upward force, maybe even a little bit of negative X, so the box is traveling this way, I think. Let's just check. Yep. So the box is traveling that way, so if we give them a little negative X as well, we'll get those particles flying in that direction as well. Maybe not. Let's try that again. They are stubborn. I don't know why they're not moving, those ones. What are you doing? They're not even getting, they're not even receiving this force value, which is odd. These ones are going for gold. They're off. Yeah, what are these guys doing? What are you doing? Why aren't you moving? Turn on my velocity. They're not even receiving velocity. So let's just investigate what might be going on here. We've got 0, 1, 2, 3. I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to change the jitter seed. Just to see if getting a different distribution of particles changes their behavior. Because sometimes it can be as simple as that. We can also just impart on them a little velocity, and that may help. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's... Let's just see. I'm going to turn this guy off. And this pop force, I would have expected to have a little bit more. Oh, there we go. Oh, look at that. Oh, they're actually emitting a ton of particles because of the substep, I think. I'm just going to turn that min down. There we go. So you can see, because I took the minimum down, now that they're not emitting 6 particles, I guess it may be. And they're all moving. Well, let's turn that on again. So weird. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to recalculate the velocity on this collision gear. Collision geo. Compute velocity. Sometimes, when you have velocities coming out of RBD sims, they can be a little bit wacky. I may have mentioned this last time. So I usually recalculate them, and you can see they are differently calculated. So sometimes that can have an impact on the result as well. Why? What are you doing? Alright, so let's do add to inherited velocity and just give them some variance in various directions. This will just give them a random vector. So weird. What are you doing? Pop force. Let's turn that off. Oh, you know what? I guess this is quite large, the scale of this. We're 10 times scale, so I might actually crank these values up. Hey, there we go. Alright. So, yeah, it's probably a little much. But perhaps... Oh, there we go. Fly! Okay, so let's see if we can get this box to take those particles, and it doesn't, and that's probably because of that substeps. Now CFL condition governs which substep is used, min or max, or you know, as things move faster, it travels further. That's what this CFL condition is. It's like a distance for how much the particles will have traveled before it kicks into the max substeps. So if we set this really low, it will increase or have a higher chance of using those max substeps, but it doesn't really seem to still have. It may just be as well that this, it should, here is where it should. Here's where it should collide. Now with fast moving collisions, that's right, crank it up, times it by 100. So with fast moving collisions, one thing to check is, because we are using substeps, it's important to see what this is doing in the subframe information. So what I do is turn on global, or open global animation options, turn off integer frame values and set the step to 0.1. Then you can see I can step through, and it is actually moving in this subframe information. You can see here 22.6, 0.7, 0.8. So you can see it's moving in those subframes, and that's good. That's what we want. Because if it wasn't, if it had no subframe information, it would just jump between those whole frames. And if you're using substeps in pops and you want good collisions, then it's just going to move through those particles, probably. But this is good. This is what we want to see. So, what is going on? How should he do it? Well, yeah, I mean, my logic for upping the scale of the forces is because we are 10 times scale, everything behaves, you know, everything's sort of assuming that it's within the smaller meter scale. Yeah, this box now you can see is, I guess, like 10 meters or something. So it's actually quite a large box. So by upping the force scale, it kind of is like scaling the objects down before simulating. It's just an easy way of doing it. It's not exactly the same, but it kind of does work. Alright, so let's see. Maybe I'll go min substeps 2. Let's go to our source as well. All points. Birth. $F. Maybe what I don't want to happen is get like too many particles emitted, because you can see now when I increase that to 2 minimum substeps, I get 2 particles for every point, and that is not what I wanted. And they still don't collide. Why? You can see here, like, here's the problem where the box is moving so quick that it jumps through that position in one frame. So it goes from the particles are inside the box on that frame, and then they're outside the box on that frame. And that's the issue there. And that's why we need more substeps. But I'm sure there's a way to do it. But I'm not actually sure how to only get just the particles that I want on that frame. How do I do it? Let's try jitter birth time and see if that helps. I suspect that I'm just gonna... So the collisions work a little bit better there. But yeah, I get these clusters of points. And that ain't what I want. If anyone has any suggestions, I'm all ears. I mean, I can work out workarounds, but yeah, I don't know what to do about that. I guess, one thing that I could do is emit them slightly sooner. If I do $F equals 22, that will emit them on the first frame. And then I think I can keyframe min substeps. So if I keyframe it to 1 on the first frame, and then on the second frame, keyframe it to 6, let's see if that works. I think it might. And let's see if that helps our collisions. No. Womp womp womp. Why isn't it working? Min substeps 1. Let's get 12. It's entirely possible that this doesn't work, because sometimes, and I couldn't really remember if it was pops or not, that keyframing substeps can work. I know it works with Pyro, but maybe it doesn't work with pops. Maybe it only takes the substep value on the first frame. Well, this is proving more challenging than what I was expecting. So, what can we do? Here's another workaround. So I'm going to set it to 12 and just see if that makes for good collisions, because that's really what I care about. Do you need to graduate high school to learn graphic design? No, I wouldn't say that you do. I mean, there are other pros to graduating high school, but look, you don't need to graduate high school to learn any creative field, I wouldn't have thought. But I think it is important to have, good education. So, it helps with lots of things. It helps with getting jobs, it helps with getting visas, all that kind of stuff. But no, the short answer is no. But I find, like, when I was at school, I struggled to see the importance of many subjects, especially maths and things like that. Even though I quite liked maths, but it was hard to see, how this is relevant to to me, and it's not really relevant to you at that point in time. You just feel like you're being made to do it, but later on, you realize that it's some of these things are actually useful. The amount of times that I've actually now used those things. I don't know why this is erroring. Those things in that I was taught in school, like even just simple mathematical things, but complex things as well. Yeah, it's like, oh wow, that actually was useful. So don't write it all off if you're still in high school. So much so that I try to teach people a little bit of maths and a little bit of physics, because it's important. It helps the understanding of how to do this stuff properly, especially when you're dealing with simulations and complex kind of ideas in Houdini. If chickens don't end up flocking, some dust particles and smoke would definitely tie the pieces together. Yeah, absolutely, Alan. Education for the sake of one's own curiosity is the best thing. I think that's it, and I think that's the thing that's hard when you're at school, is like you kind of being forced to do it a little bit. But when you discover a passion for something, and then that guides you through through your own learning, that's where learning becomes fun, and where it becomes easy. It becomes much easier to learn something if you're passionate about it, but it can be really hard to learn something if it's just you're being forced to do it. So yeah. 2D animation, I'm no 2D animation expert, but I hear Toon Boom is the kind of one of the weapons of choice of 2D animators. I think there are other ones. If anyone out there is a 2D animator, feel free to chime in. Yeah, I think Toon Boom is like one of the main ones that people use. I would look up, like, if you have a favorite animation, see if you can find out what they use. What do you think is the best discipline to maintain everyday behavior, mastery effects in Houdini in shortest time? Can't afford paid courses. Toon Boom, yes, that's right. I don't know who makes it, but if you Google Toon Boom, you'll find it pretty quickly, I think. Look, I think if you do want to master Houdini, and if you do want to do it in a relatively short amount of time, first of all, it takes time to master this stuff, so don't expect to be a master in 6 months or a year. It really does take time to, to gain experience and to really be able to work with this stuff in a, at a master level. It takes a long time to get to that. So, but I think, it's possible to become proficient in the software within a year, or less time if you really put the hard work in. Look, it's not about doing tutorials 24/7 though. It's more about learning the ideas and learning how to work with the software. And of course you need to do tutorials to get to that point. But at a certain point you must put the tutorials aside and create things on your own. Because it's only at that point that you start figuring out problems for yourself, instead of just relying on watching somebody else tell you what things to put in, or what buttons to push, or what nodes to put down. That is helpful to a point, but if that is all you do, then when that is removed, in the context of if you had a job and you don't have those tutorials to fall back on, then you don't really know how to do it by yourself. So that to me is the biggest thing, is that you do the tutorials, you know, you learn the basics, you learn how people, you know, like me, put things together. But then you put that aside and you go, okay, so today I'm going to do some RBD destruction by myself and set it up from scratch. And that's where you really have to figure things out and solve those problems, and you will break things and you have to fix them. You may have to Google the answer after trying, and then that's fine, you know, if you need to go and search for the answers, but that's a big part of it as well. It's like, I don't always know, you know, what the right answer is, or I make a problem in Houdini that I have to fix, and sometimes I have to Google how to fix that, or what is going on, or if it's like some really complicated error or something, you know, go and look, see if other people have had that error and how do they fix it. I do think you need to put in a lot of time though if you want it to be a quick process. You have to treat it like a job, and that can be hard if you're working as well. But you know, when I learnt 3D, I wasn't working much. And, you know, in Australia, I had the luxury of being supported, you know, by the government during that time, because I was still young. So I qualified for this, you know, payment. When, if you're not earning much, you can get a subsidy, which is, you know, I know that not everyone has that. But that allowed me to, you know, kind of work a little bit and also focus a lot on my study, my personal study. And I just spent a year working like every day, you know, 10, 12 hours just doing 3D. It wasn't in Houdini, it was 3D Studio Max back then. But I just worked at it and worked at it and worked at it and kept pushing myself to make better things. And, you know, the first thing you make is terrible, and then the next thing you make is slightly better, and then, you know, you get 6 months down the track and you look at the stuff that you created that you thought was good, and it's terrible compared to the stuff that you're creating now. So you just got to keep pushing yourself. So yeah, and you know, that never stops. I don't ever stop learning this stuff. Houdini is always changing, and there's many facets of Houdini that I still don't completely understand. But you know, you never stop learning. I think you know, some students that I've had in the past think that, you know, they get to a level of proficiency and that's it. You know, I can stop learning now, I'll get a job. But it never stops. If you want to, you know, maintain your career and be, you know, the best sort of effects artist that you can be, you never stop learning new techniques and just pushing yourself. So yeah, I don't know, I hope that helps. But you do need to be disciplined though. You do need to keep at it, try and do a little bit, you know, every day at least, or, you know, whenever you can. But you also have to live and work and make money. So, yeah. Priorities. Alright, well, you can see that this is starting to take shape. I wish these were chickens. It would be better if they were chickens, but alas, that is all we have. I could get a chicken, just kind of like a rigid body chicken tumbling around. I mean, that would be kind of funny. But so we can see these birds, you know, kind of flying off. You can see how they're disappearing when I rotate, when I zoom in. It's because they're actually packed agents at this point. So what I might do is unpack them before I do my copy to points. They're also a poly soup, so I'm going to put a convert down to convert them to just full polygons. Yeah, you can look it up, poly soup. It just means that I can't select individual polygons, or, you know, they sometimes display a little weirdly. So now, now you can see they don't disappear. They're not getting culled because they were packed. And I can choose to pack them on here as well, which is probably a better option, so that they get instanced at the point of instancing. Okay, so let's have a look. I don't know why this is erroring. Let's take a look through the camera. Now what will happen is that they're gonna collide with other things too. So we need to think about that aspect, that there are many other things around here. We've just put it in this box. But, you know, at this point, this guy's probably flying through the cloth, maybe. Let's see. Come out. Just recalculating the vellum solver by the looks of it. I haven't actually written any of this stuff to disk, so it does recalculate sometimes. At least it's not too slow. Here we go. Come on. You can do it. So what I'm thinking is that maybe the birds then feed into the cloth sim as a collider, so that the cloth reacts to them punching through, maybe. We should probably also bring in the rest of the hard surfaces as colliders, potentially. So, there we go. Here's this bird here. Look at that. He's gonna punch through there. There it goes. Through the cloth. So, you know, that could be a good opportunity for a collision. So let's bring in... I think I've mentioned this movie once before in my streams, but this makes me think of a movie called Birdemic, which is like one of those B-grade, B, C, D-grade horror movies with some great animation. It just makes me think of that. It's hilarious. Look up the trailer. I'm going to create a null here and say out. Birdemic. Just for fun. And I did turn off the pack-in instance. I'll leave that off because I do want to I actually want to convert these to for vellum. Actually, yeah, maybe it doesn't matter. I was thinking maybe I need to convert them to a volume again, but I might not need to. So let's go back into constrained sim. This is where our vellum is, and this here is our collision for the frame. And then we've got a whole bunch of collisions going on here, so there we go. So they're being merged in there. So that's where we're going to bring in our Birdemic. I should have labeled this node better, but it's GO1. There we go. And they do have velocity, but you can see the velocity is just a straight line. It's because it's taking it from the particle. So I might actually retrail these, and that will then get the flapping velocity. I don't know, maybe that's a problem, but let's see. Let's merge it in with everything else. Here we go. Got our birdies. He's flying through that big bit of wood there, but you know, it's probably not going to be seen. We could always bring that collider in. And one thing that we need to be mindful of is that we're doing this activation stuff. If you don't know what I'm talking about, have a look at the last stream, or the first stream where I did this. But basically I'm transferring from the colliders, the moving colliders, to activate the cloth at the time that, you know, those collisions kind of pass through that area. What I just need to make sure is that when, at the point that this bird flies through, that this is active. And it is. You can see it's colored. So it is active at that point. Now, sometimes what you can do, a little trick, instead of recalculating this whole thing, a little trick that I do, might not work with this thing. If I just turn off a node and then turn it on again, see that? It's now calculating 41 again. So what I'm hoping it doesn't explode. Hey Lapis, our classes are online, but they are in person as well. So it's kind of like this, except you know, we use Zoom for doing these mentored sessions. So you'd be paired with a mentor from the industry, someone experienced who's worked on many films, many projects. You might be in a class. There are different options. There's there's a class option, or there's a private tutoring option as well. And then there's pre-recorded content that you will do each week, and then at a time, one day during the week at a chosen time that you work out, you do a 1 hour Q&A session where you can ask questions about the content, talk to your mentor about the work that you've done, get feedback, and also just, you know, when I have my sessions, I just, if there's not a lot to talk about, if you kind of went fine with the content, you don't have many questions, then we just talk about, you know, the industry or answer any other questions that you might have. So it's pre-recorded content as well as that live Q&A where you can dive deeper into things. And this, you know, like I do things like this in my Q&As where I'm working on a project and then we just go, okay, so cool, let's do something fun with it, or let's show you some other technique that you aren't aware of. So they kind of are like this, but more interactive, where, you know, it's a one-on-one sort of thing where you can talk and see each other as well. I can't see you right now, but you can see me, so it's kind of like that. But yeah, you know, it's great way to learn from people that have been through, you know, have done it all. They've worked in the industry, they've been where you are at the start, and they know kind of the shortcuts and the tips and tricks to get you there faster. I think that's what's good about it. So, and like, if you look at some of the mentors, they've worked on some amazing projects. Sometimes I'm blown away by looking at, you know, some of the mentors' IMDb listings for films and animations that they've worked on. It's pretty cool, pretty amazing. So let's see, it's going slow at frame 22. That thing that I was trying to do didn't work, incidentally, which was to trim the simulation at frame 41 and then start it from that point. But it started to freak out. And this is freaking out too. I'm not sure why, but I wonder if it is because of the birdemic starting at that point. So what I might do is go to time shift and clamp that to the first frame 22 so that they are present from the very first frame, so that they don't just randomly appear, and that might be freaking something out. I don't know. I'm just gonna hit save as well, just in case. Because it was, you know, frame 22, that was the moment that our particles are born, so maybe bringing in collisions like that isn't a good idea with film. I don't know. It might just, yeah, it might have trouble. Because on the very first frame of a Vellum sim, it does this kind of process. Maybe it's part of that. There we go. Now it's gone past it, so that's good. Here's our bird crate. There's a bird. Oh, maybe it's not a bird. The Vellum, you know, is getting progressively slower the more collisions that we add into this simulation. So, you know, it's starting to get a little slow to just watch. But when starting out, should I really be focus fully production like till rendering, or just focus making the effects? Then when proficient, move to the rendering aspect. I actually think it's good to focus on rendering early, because it, like, you know, it gets you thinking about the final product. And, you know, it depends which kind of environment you end up working in. But some studios require effects artists to fully realize their effects and render them. Some don't. Some will just ask you to pass it off. But I think it's an invaluable skill to have, the presentation aspect. And it also helps you develop your sort of, I guess, creative eye and visual eye, which is a really important thing in being an artist in, you know, in any field. I find when artists are purely focused on the simulation aspects of Houdini or the technical aspects of Houdini, then their work is not that good. It may be technically proficient, but creatively it has a lot of problems. So I think it's good to focus on that aspect all the way through. And it's not difficult to learn rendering, you know, it's a pretty simple area of Houdini. So I think it's good to kind of, you know, learn it just as you go and render everything out that you do that you think is worth rendering. Yeah, I would not leave it till the end. I think it's a really good thing to kind of, you know, learn. Because if you want to present this stuff to get a job as well, you have to present it. And that's the difficult thing when you're working by yourself, is it's different to when you're in a studio. It's like I might not have to render my thing out because I can just hand it off to the next guy. But when you're working by yourself, there is no next guy. So you need to be able to present this stuff in a way that looks good. So, you know, I think it's certainly important. And that visual eye is a really important thing to develop. Knowing what looks good and knowing what looks wrong and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, focus on presentation. It is really important. It makes you a better artist and a more desirable artist. So, we can see that our little birdie is bursting through. Now, that's kind of cool. But now, I've been, you know, so kind of absorbed with the technical aspect that I do need to make sure that this looks right in terms of speed. Because I know, you know, when we first looked at these, they looked a bit slow. Do I screen record? What do you mean, Rizwan? Do you mean during Q&As or... So, I mean, certainly won't, like with CGS Spectrum, with the Q&As, they're all recorded and they get uploaded so you can watch them back as many times as you like. All those feedback sessions and all these kind of live things, you know, are all recorded to share with the students. Okay, so I've made my birds blue, and now I'm just going to, it's gonna make it re-cook this, but maybe if I start it from frame 4. Oops, not that one. Flipbook, I'm going to go from frame 4, then it might not restart the vellum simulation. Just give this a random label so it opens a new mplay. Here we go. Right, there goes our little hero bird. Fly, you're free now. And this guy's bursting through as well, which is looks cool. But let's see. Oh, look. Yeah, their flapping's pretty slow, especially down here. Like this guy. It's okay when they're kind of moving, they don't look too bad, but when they're really slowly moving, it looks a little funny. So, as part of the course, I actually teach a technique to speed up and slow down animations based on the particle speed, which I'm not going to show you how to do today, but you know, it's an interesting kind of concept where you can actually speed up and slow down animations that are instanced onto particles based on their velocity, and that's, you know, that's a bit of fun. I think it's not too bad. I think it could be faster overall. Like this guy feels a little bit slow. This one doesn't feel too bad, but yeah, I think we could get like faster flapping. Well, it's always important to check these things as you're going through, you know. As we're just slowly simulating, it's kind of like, oh, it looks alright, but you definitely want to check things to make sure that they are kind of working well. So let's do, on here, what I'm going to do is just a simple time shift, and I'm just going to turn off integer frames, do $FF for float frame times 4, and that will be 4 times faster. So you can see, template the other one, you can see how much faster the new one's flapping now. So basically I'm just saying, you know, what was frame 1 is now frame 4, and what was frame 2 is now frame 8, so the frame numbers double. So, or actually not double, they quadruple. So there we go, that's much faster. We don't need to re-simulate or anything, it'll just instance that faster one on. So play, and you can see how that feels a little faster. Now one other thing that I do as part of that lesson on varying the speed of the animation is to vary the offset as well. And that's, you know, that's another thing that will improve this, is to vary the offset of those birds, because they're all flapping at the same rate. But again, I'm not going to go into that today. But that's another option, you know, that will make this even better. So let's just do a little flipbook on that and see what that looks like. Just to check. You know, it feels a little better. I think maybe it could be even faster, like they're really kind of chaotic flapping. Let's try this times 10. Oh, weird. What's it doing? It's calculating... It's recalculating the pop sim for some reason. I don't know why. Weird. It's always annoying when it recalculates something that really it shouldn't be. Something bizarre going on with this one, the error cooking collision VDB. This also probably doesn't need to be as high res as I have it. Another thing that just occurred to me is, you know, these collisions we were struggling with early on, I was struggling with, is perhaps it's because these are very thin surfaces. So one thing that you can do, because this is just a collision object, this is not the renderable object, you could use a peak to just inflate those surfaces a little bit. It doesn't have to be like a great deal, but a little bit will just make those collision shapes just bigger and broader, and that sometimes can help with, you know, with collisions inside boxes and inside containers. We can try that out. Well, I can't see any particles. Oh, there's one. Maybe. Maybe they're all getting carried along now. Yeah. That might have done the trick. This guy's still going for it. And you know, if you wanted like more chaotic bird motion, you could do like a curl noise or something, or amp up the noise frequency so it's like, you know, it's much more chaotic. That could be interesting as well. Let's check it out. It's a slow sim. It's probably this 12 substeps, you know. Even though it's particles, there's not a lot going on. There's a lot of substeps there, so it will kind of result in a much slower simulation. Birds in a box. There's a few collisions there, but look, I think in the chaos of this whole thing, it's probably fine. And just like how you can vary the speed and the offset of each one, you could potentially vary the animation as well, so that certain certain birds get hit in a certain way, or like this one for example is kind of under the box. Maybe they get put into a certain group, and that group gets a different type of animation. Could be interesting to play with. What can you say about posting stuff I create social media? Good idea to post everything I create or select few? Yeah, good question. I don't know what the answer is there. I think I err on the side of it's good to post everything, or at least it's good to post work in progress stuff. And you can always delete things if you end up not being happy with it. But I think at the start it's kind of good to get feedback, and it may confirm, or you may be surprised by the reaction to your things, where people might give you feedback that you don't like. They may say, oh, this doesn't look very good, which maybe helps you challenge your idea of what is good and what is bad. I think it's very easy when you're working by yourself and not sharing things to think that everything looks great, where in reality maybe it doesn't. So I think it's good to share things, and I think it's good to share the whole process, whether it's just an animation or just a flip book. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard for me to say because I'm in a very different place in my career now. So, and my confidence with my abilities is different to when I was first starting. I may have felt completely different about it. I probably did feel very differently about sharing things that weren't perfect back then. But I actually think it's kind of cool to see works in progress. So yeah, look, I wouldn't be ashamed of putting things up like that. And you can always, if you decide that it's kind of like, oh well, actually this doesn't look any good anymore, or I've done something that looks way better, then you can just kind of take it down. I don't know. Yeah, it's up to you really. But yeah, I think certainly you want to put your best stuff on a portfolio, like a show reel or portfolio. But if it's just social media, it's kind of, I don't know. I feel like it's a bit more personal, and you can maybe share the process a little more. I'm always interested to see people's processes. I think it's more interesting sometimes than the final product. Look at this bird. He's going crazy down here. And I don't hate what's going on. It looks like he's kind of trapped and flapping around, which is a little bit sad. But it doesn't look terrible. But that may be a case where we maybe kill that particle or change that animation so it's it looks different. Man, this is getting slow now. Alright. So let's just turn off the market stall. You're working to get your GED. Hopefully you'll be learning here soon. Hey, nice. Yeah, look. I mean, I think we have a really good 2D animation course, Lapis. So if that's what you're interested in, then feel free to reach out to people at CG Spectrum as well if you want more information about it. I know everyone's very happy to talk to students or talk to people that are interested in learning with us. So if you ever have questions, then feel free to reach out. I'm not the best person to talk to you about 2D animation, but there are people that know much more about it than I do. So yeah, you can see that this has the kind of potential to be interesting, and we could crank up the amount of birds as well. I think like that. We've really had only very few particles to begin with. You can contact them. I think it's hello@CG Spectrum. Let me get that for you. Let's find it. should see it on the website somewhere, but I'll try and get you that. I think it's just hello@cgspectrum.edu.au or .com. Let me put it in here. I don't know if you can see that in the comments, but yeah, it's hello@cgspectrum.edu.au, or I think .com works as well. So, but have a look at the website cgspectrum.com, and you should be able to see it if you go to the like contact page. And yeah, if you want to know more about the course, you know, they can give you more information, or about, you know, if you need anything before joining the course, you know. But we offer both introduction and advanced courses, so if you don't know anything about 2D animation, then you can take the intro. So I cranked up the amount of particles, and let's see what that looks like. So many birds. It's a birdemic. Possibly too many, because I mean the reason for keeping it kind of sparse amount of points is because there is no bird-to-bird collision happening. You know, these are just instanced bits of geometry on particles that don't respect, you know, each other. So I guess one thing that we could do is put in some sort of flocking behaviors, like avoidance. So pop interact, for example, will repel particles from each other. Particles in pops, they don't collide with each other, you know, they're what are described as dumb particles. But a pop interact node will kind of create a force around each particle to push it away if it detects, or not even if it detects a nearby particle. I think it just has this kind of force that it's gonna use to, you know, to push each particle away from the other. So you could use that, and you've got a radius you can see. So, you know, if you want them to be closer together, you reduce the radius. If you want them to be further apart, you increase the radius. So that could work, you know, depending on the size of your object that you're instancing on. It can help to, you know, to push those apart a little bit. And because of our scale, we might need to crank that value up a little bit. Like, yeah, maybe the core radius can be 1. We'll see them maybe jump out if it's too big. Yeah, it seems okay. So, yeah, you know, it's kind of a wacky experiment. And it sort of works, but it obviously needs a lot of polish. But I think I might... if you don't mind answering, I'm curious if you could give a brief overview of how you recommend adding atmospheric fog to a scene in Houdini. Hey, sure. Good question. I don't mind random questions. Don't have to always be on topic. Do you mean, Keegan, like just a very uniform fog? Or do you mean something a little more detailed? Because they're very different approaches. If you mean just like a uniform kind of fog, but yeah, that's easy enough to achieve. Might just open another Houdini. Yeah, let me know which type you're after. Oh, there we go. That maybe pushed them apart a little more. Quite simple. Okay. So with a fog, let's have a look here. Just gonna get rid of this. So if I just create a grid, and I'm just going to create a little terrain so that we can actually see this. Use a mountain node. So, you know, if I wanted to create a fog for this environment, I'll create a new camera for starters. Now there are, you know, there are a few ways that you could approach this, but one of the easiest ways is to just put a box. And if you had an environment, you could put a bound around the environment to create a box, but I'm just gonna create a box and move it up. Oops. Actually, yeah, I mean, I'll show you this. I shouldn't be doing this. No translates at the top level. Here's where I'll do my size. So I'm just going to go like that. Now you can see that, whoops, the box is outside of this is much larger than the mountain scene that we have. Now in materials, you have in the gallery a volume, sorry, I was going to say utility, but a volume called uniform volume. And you can actually apply that to a mesh and it will turn it into a volume at render time. Let's see if this works. So I'm going to create a mantra node. Hey David, how's it going? Kayaking, sounds good. Where were you kayaking, David? I'm going to change it to physically based rendering. It actually doesn't matter. Ray tracing or PBR is probably fine for this. And am I going to put a light in the scene? I'm not, for starters. So let's go objects. And I'm just going to pick my grid, first of all, and just see what we get from that. There we go. So, awful mountain range. And then I'm going to add in my box. Hit accept. It's giving a error here, but that's okay. It's not, it's to do with displacement, which, I don't know, it's weird. But we don't actually need to worry about that. But you can see that that has given a fog in my scene. So, the uniform volume will, and you can see there is a displacement tab here, and that's where it's erroring from, because this displacement bound is bound to have enable displacement turned on, and you can see, yeah, I don't know, I think it's complaining because it's 0, but I don't know, whatever. So under smoke you've got cloud density, which you can use to define the density of that fog, right? It's not really giving us a great deal of fall-off though. And in fact, when it's 10, it looks like it has less than when I have it at 1, which is odd. So that's an option, like a very basic option, to just create a box, put a uniform volume shader on it, and that's all you get. Another option that you can try is to use a primitive node. I think it's a primitive node. Volumes. Is that what I want? No, I think it's a volume node. Yeah, this one. This one has this cool ability to choose from camera. Up here under name, I'll put density. Camera. If I pick my camera that I created and give it a value, 1, it actually will create a volume based on the camera frustum, and you have controls for near and far, and this is really handy for creating fog based on the camera, or many other things actually. I find this is a really good way to do camera based selection. So for instance, if I took this into my grid and I wanted to select the grid just in the camera frustum, let me just hide other. Group, plug that second input into the volume, and then do points, keep in bounding regions, bounding volume, and bounding volume points of it. Oh, I think yeah, you need to play with this ISO surface or something, or maybe invert. Let's try that. Oh, there we go. So I think because like Houdini volume, it's not a VDB, it needs to be inverted or something with the ISO surface. But there you go, you can see now I've selected just the points that are within the camera frustum based on this volume that you create. It's quite useful when you need to do stuff like that. But let's go back to this. So now we've got this fog which we can control fall off from the camera, which is kind of quite handy. So, you know, we can actually start it at a certain point. If we only wanted it to kind of kick in 3 meters away from camera or something, we could do it like that. And you can already see in the viewport that that actually is working quite well. So we can use this Z near and far to control where that volume exists. I find that really good because sometimes you don't want fog right in front of the camera. You want to start it a little further back. So that's quite handy. Now you've got different options for changing the sampling of this volume as well. If we have a look at the render view here, let's check that out. This still has that uniform volume shader on it, which is fine. Yeah, we actually have a volume now. So, and there you go. So let's give our grid a little black color so it's a little bit clearer to see what's going on. There you go. So you can see that there. Now you can also see that we're getting a lot of noise, and that's because we have a volume, and volumes can be noisy. Don't have any lights yet, but you can go and increase the stochastic samples of a volume, and it should, although it doesn't seem to be, increase the, it should decrease the noise, but interesting, doesn't seem to be. Let's try upping the pixel samples. Upping the pixel samples seems to fix it, but yeah, that's kind of weird. I thought that the stochastic samples would do it. Let's go and change the resolution of this. So I'm going to choose by size and have a look at the res that generates. So that's given me a 10 million voxel, 10 million voxel resolution, which is, you know, a decent res. So you can then do like 0.08, have a look at that, 19 million. You know, fog does not need to be high resolution, especially if it has no detail. It's interesting that doing that kind of drastically changed what we're getting there, but I wonder if that's just something broke, because it looks like it's not even filling the yeah, weird. What? By size, non-square, max axes. Oh, that's super weird. I don't know why that's doing that. Well, with max axes as well, you can also just up the uniform sampling divisions. Yeah, it seems to change the like the depth maybe. Maybe because you have more samples, it changes how this near and far, like what values that near and far gives you. I don't know, it's weird. You can also up the density value here, and that will give you a denser volume, although it doesn't seem to be. Let's check out the uniform volume. Hey, there we go. What's weird about this is that you can see that alpha isn't actually changing there. Now, I would have expected, if I was to put 100 in cloud density, that the alpha would change. And it's not. So that's kind of odd. I'm going to create my own shader. Material builder. Lighting, compute lighting. Hook up CF, OF, oops, and the F components. And then into here, I'm just going to do a, what is it called? Volume shader core layer. Bind density. So we have a density volume. We're going to plug that into the density input of the volume shader. Now we have similar things that we had on the uniform volume: density scale, shadow density, so some other things as well, emission. So let's apply that and see if it works any differently. Material builder, render. We can also put lights in as well, so, you know, this is kind of working without lights at the moment. And look at that. Solid alpha. That's what I would have expected. And also, it's still a bit noisy. I thought maybe it had cleaned up a little bit. It seems in here it has. Like, this is quite noisy, but this is nice and smooth now. I always build my own volume shaders because I find that they just seem to work a little better. So now, if I go... And also you can do really kind of cool custom stuff if you build your own, which can be a little bit harder. So now I can vary the density. There we go. And that's working a lot better now. And our density at the background is looking a lot better. That basically looks like a Z depth, which is great. That's kind of what you want. I mean, you can do this stuff as a Z depth pass as well. You can actually get something that looks like that just straight out of the render that you could then use. It depends how you're using it, I suppose. But you could use a pass like that, a Z depth pass, straight out of the render in comp to create a uniform fog like this. So you don't necessarily need to create this as an object. But, you know, sometimes you do. I mean, sometimes you might want to add noise to this. If I was to put a turbulent noise down here, plug it into P, and then multiply that density by this turbulent noise, let's see what happens. See that? Now I've got a noisy fog. This noise at the moment though, you have to bear in mind when you're inside the material context and you plug something into P, it's working on screen space. It's not world space. So that's why we can see the noise pattern so clearly in here, because this position is basically X and Y. And that's why it's just giving us an image of the noise. But, you know, that could be useful as well. Which you couldn't do with a Z depth pass. But you could in comp, probably. I don't know, does that help, Keegan? Is that kind of what you're after? That's what I would do if I wanted a very uniform fog. But if you want to see in Mantra, under image, extra image planes, you can turn it on here, shading depth PZ. And if I just turn off my, get rid of my box. Hey, cool, no worries. Look, there are literally like so many ways to do the same thing in Houdini that's kind of like, yeah, you know, that's a couple of ways that I've showed you, but yeah, there's loads of different ways that you could apply things. Have a look at the view bar now, and look at PZ, and you see that gives you that kind of look as well. So I could take that into my compositor of choice and use that to generate a fog potentially. And you can see by changing the value of the Z depth, it allows me to change that where that fog is lying. So you can see, like, I can really dial it in if I wanted to get it in a specific area, or have it be really dense at the back, or even invert it. You know, so that can be a good option for uniform fog as well on an environment, is just to use the Z depth in compositing. You'll notice that it doesn't actually give you it in the background, so you would need to come up with a way of adding it to the sky as well, or place an object in there for the sky. But yeah, you know, that can be an option as well, so that's a good one to kind of investigate if you're doing any kind of compositing. That could be a good thing to look at, because that's always going to be from the camera to the back. Yeah, there you go. All right, so I think that's kind of, you know, that's kind of all right. I'm going to just leave that one there because it's going to take a while to simulate this whole thing again. But what I might look at doing is we talked about... So John, one of the students at CGS Spectrum who's been following along with my stream, did a cool simulation where he filled a barrel with water. And I thought that was a pretty cool, fun thing to do. But he was having problems with it. And quick look at this in Nuke. Oh, at what, Alan? The Z depth? Is that what you mean? I can show you that in Nuke. So what John was doing was putting... Hey, no worries, Keegan. All good. The Z depth pass. Yeah, sure. Let's have a quick look. So I'll save this frame somewhere. And Z depth test .exr. Has to be an EXR if you're doing this stuff. In Nuke, you want it to be a full kind of open image with lots of depth, and you want to have these... Basically what it does, it will encode these extra image planes into the EXR, so it becomes a multi-channel EXR. Save that. And I will open Nuke. It's it's not overly difficult to use these passes. So here's Nuke. Let me load up that image. There we go. Just drag it in. So there's our image. You know, not terribly exciting, but if you have a look under RGBA and look at depth, there's our depth pass, and it usually shows up red in here. So the way to access that in here, in our node graph, is to shuffle it out. So we need to move it from being embedded to actually being usable. And the process of shuffling will convert something from a channel that is embedded into RGBA information. So you can see this is why it shows up red, because usually what happens is it goes depth Z, which is just a single value, goes into the red channel. That's why it shows up red. But you can actually plug it into every channel, even alpha, and then it will show up in the alpha channel, and it looks white as well, because the same value is going into RGBA. And when you have the same value in RGBA, it's grayscale. So then the way to manipulate it is to either use the black point and white point or play with contrast. But you can see by moving that, I can actually shift where that white value is. And by moving the black point up as well, these are kind of like these are your depth values essentially in the black point and white point, and it allows me to shift that to create that same look. And then you'll notice that the alpha is solid still, but I could affect all channels, and then now you can see here I'm hitting A, I'm switching between RGB and A. So that's my alpha as well. So I could use that as a mask or something like that, or I could multiply or merge this result over my background now. And well, there we go. You can see that's the application of that over the top. And you could do all sorts of stuff, like you play with the gamma to crush it even more. Or you could brighten it or change the color even if you wanted to, have it a different color. But then it becomes slightly more tricky with the background. So what you could do with the background is put a constant down, make it white, give it RGBA as well, so it's got an alpha, and merge that underneath. So if we have a look, that's what we had. That's what we're merging. Let's have a look at the grade now though. Oh, resolution has to be the same, so 1280 by 720, we'll just make that format the same. There we go. So let's look at our grade. The problem here is that if you look at what values we're dealing with, we've got our white point 24.03. If we have a look at our depth shuffle here, look at the values down here. See how those values are here, they're sort of like 2, but up here, further back, they're around approaching 10, looks like. Let's set our color value here to 10. Aha, look at that. Great. And then when I merge that over, now I get my background part of that. So that's the important thing when you got to get that value right so that when you do your grade, it matches. You could potentially do the merge after the grade, I suppose. But yeah, this sort of then becomes, it makes that constant part of the background, and it will sort of play and blend in with your value. As you shift that, you can see how it's getting brighter back there with everything else. So that's kind of cool way to deal with it. And you could push that further back so that you could give that value whatever depth you want it to sort of play. So as I push my my white point further, as I push my black point further, that's so far beyond now, so it's going to give me that solid. So that can be a really interesting way of playing with it. It just gives you that control, and that's this is how we would do it in film, probably, if it was a simple thing like this. So yeah, Nuke is great, and this kind of whole way of working is the way to go, really, because it's like it's ultimately flexible. I can just play with this all day long, whereas if I'm doing this in Houdini, I have to re-render every time I want to make a change. So this process of doing it in post is definitely advantageous. Cool. Well, I hope that makes sense. Now I've only got 20 minutes left, but I'm going to attempt to do a quick little setup for fluids. So let's see which barrel. This guy is kind of this guy's the main guy here. Let's go and isolate him. Oops. So yeah, one of the issues with putting fluid inside of this is, one, it's moving very fast, but also, as we discussed with particles, they're very thin surfaces, and that is very problematic for collisions. So, and how do we fill this barrel with water? I'm thinking that, well, first of all, I'm going to time shift this so it's no longer time dependent. Freeze it on that frame there. I'm going to turn it into a VDB from polygons. Hey, no worries, Alan. Anytime. Turn it into a VDB from polygons. That might make it a solid object. And if I make it a really low-res voxel, you can see how it's sort of, a super low-res version of that barrel. If I then convert it to a VDB, and then make it a polygon, you can see that now I have this kind of volume inside my barrel. And if I adjust the ISO value to shrink it in, I can kind of get a volume happening inside my barrel, which is not touching anything, hopefully. Then I could use a points from volume to fill that with points. That looks like pretty good for starters. Let's go jitter scale 1 just to get those jittered. We could play with the voxel size to get it slightly smoother. There we go. It's a bit jagged. Let's go take this down a little bit. So the key with filling an object like this is that you don't want to have any intersections at the very start. Well, maybe 0.6 was kind of alright. There we go. So let's go with that. It's not, there's gaps, which isn't ideal, but it's okay. So let's do, what do I want to do? Oh, I'm just going to take it straight into a dot network now. And I'm also going to do this. The old null out collision geo. I'm going to do out flip geo, just in case I have another null named that somewhere else in here. VDB polygons. Looks good. Out flip collision. Oh, out flip VDB. It's a race against the clock. And then what time does it start moving? We want to choose basically maybe that frame 40, to be the first frame of our simulation. So let's go frame 40. Flip object. Flip solver. We could actually just use the default here instead of using a source node. We only want this to source on frame 40, so we can actually use this default fluid input here, this input type surface SOP or particle field. This gives us a SOP path, which we could just reference this source here. So out, flip, source. There it is. And you can see that it's outside our bounds that we have here on our flip solver. So let's put our bounds like that. And actually, looks like our bounds need to be quite big because of our scale, so I'll scale them up. Move it over. And up. Put a ground plane in. Whoa. Concerning portfolio creating for an effects artist, what should it look like or consist of? Basically, what makes effects artists an effects artist? Well, look, I mean, if you're talking about film, you know, there are many components that we are looking for in a portfolio. But one of the main things is creativity and quality of execution. You know, not necessarily big destructions and massive flip sims, but just really well executed things, even if they are very simple things. I'm going to change this to particles. So I'm just going to do a test and see what this looks like for starters. Okay, groovy. Now static object. So yeah, look, I mean, quite often when we look at reels for junior artists who are applying to jobs, you know, a lot of the times people have a lot of tutorial content on their show reels, and we have seen it time and time again. And everyone's show reel ends up looking exactly the same because they end up doing the same tutorials. And they think that they look amazing, which they do, because that's what the tutorial is. It's showing you how to create some amazing thing. But when I see that, and I see only tutorial content on your show reel, I think, you know, can this person do things by themselves? Just like what I was saying before, you have to leave the tutorials behind at some point. So that is a big part of my consideration when I'm hiring someone is, you know, can they do this without a tutorial? I want to see things that are, you know, your own and creative. So I much prefer seeing stuff like that. I think it's also good to demonstrate that you can do simple things. So bullet hits, lightning, sparks. Those are the things that you're most likely going to be doing as a junior artist in a job when you first start. Dust, snow, you know, all those kind of things. So put them on your show reel. So prove that you can, you know, do those things. The chances of you getting on a massive destruction sequence or something like that as a junior artist going into a studio are pretty slim. So, you know, it's kind of if you target those kind of effects that are most common in films, like bullet hits and blood and all that kind of, you know, stuff that's relatively simple but still hard to do well, then, you know, you'll have a reel which kind of speaks to what the employer is looking for. Now, you can see what's happening with this simulation. The barrel's jumping away and the flip is sort of staying with it. So, you know, what's going on there? How do we deal with it? It's the same issue with the particles. Substeps are helping a little bit, but I find with flip, you know, again, same as particles, is that we may just need to put a peak on here and inflate this barrel and make it a bit of a more solid kind of collision with a bit more depth, so that it has a bit more volume to collide with. And you can see that it's actually working a little bit better. We're still getting some leaking going on, but... oh, you know what? I'm going to turn off reseeding and particle motion. So that will create and delete particles as this simulation is running, and I don't actually want that to remove particles. You can see that it actually was... we were ending up with a lot less particles than we should have been. So let's have a look. Oops. So it's a little bit better. Let's just hide this guy. So here's something else that will help. And yeah, I mean, this, you know, arguably this is not the most clever way of going about doing this type of effect. Filling it, you know, obviously you can see it's really problematic. So filling an object with a volume maybe is not the best thing to do. Maybe you should kind of create an emitter that emits fluid. Once the barrel starts to break open, then it starts to squirt out, and that might be a better way to go. But just for the sake of, you know, trying this kind of experiment, there are ways to make this better. So, I mean, upping the substeps even further, taking the CFL condition down, you know, sometimes you do just have to go crazy high with the substeps to get something like this working, where it is moving really quickly and it just needs a lot of substeps to help solve that fast motion. In this case, it still looks like it's going to leak out, but it may again be better. Now, the biggest thing that will help this is actually giving these particles some velocity. So you can see that, you know, the barrel on frame 41 is sort of moving in that direction. Let's have a look at what happens when we trail this barrel. Compute velocity. If you set it to forward difference, it will actually take the velocity from the frame that's coming, the next frame. So we're on frame 40, there's no motion, but on frame 41 it does start to move. So you can see it's registering a velocity there. If I put that trail here on the barrel before the time shift, 38, I guess I'll clamp it to 40. There we go. And then attribute transfer to my points from up here, that velocity. Now my particles are going to come in with velocity. You can see they're white instead of before. When they were blue, they had no velocity, but when they show up white, it means that they're moving, or that they're going to move because they have a velocity. And what you will see is that that whole volume of particles should now move. It may shoot too far, that velocity might be too strong, but let's see. They will actually start moving in that direction with the barrel. So even if we didn't have the collision on there, you will see them move in that direction. See that? So they're moving now under their own velocity. And that can help move them with the object that they're meant to be inside. That's a big one. So you can still see though that we're registering collision in here. And actually I might take my substeps down a little bit, just because it's very slow. It's going to go 2 and 2. Still leaking, but it's better. At least it's kind of moving in that direction now. Now, when you're dealing with collisions, and flip, it's really important to check what the collision guide actually looks like for the flip. Because this is just a representation of the geometry, and even this is just a representation of that proxy volume that we created. But the important thing is this one. And look at that. That does not look good. It's got a whole lot of holes, and you can see where those holes are is where fluid is leaking out. So that needs to be improved. So let's go back to frame 40. Look at frame 41. Our particle separation is quite high, which means that the volume that is being created for the collisions and for the velocity, this velocity here, is pretty low resolution. For the velocity, it's kind of okay, but for the collision, it's a bad thing. So let's take our particle separation down to 0.1. Step forward. It's going to be a slower simulation, but look at that barrel now. It's not so small anymore. Not so kind of, I guess, yeah, low res. That's what I'm trying to say. This is interesting though. You can see how it's getting clipped there. Now I can't remember where that setting is, but there is actually under solver, I think, automatic extrapolation by speed, max cells to extrapolate, extrapolation mode, fast moving colliders. Let's turn that on. Let's just go back and see if that helps. But what I might do is actually up this extrapolation here. Well, that actually seems to have made it worse. I'm going to up this here to 10. And see now, should now... Well, it's still clipping a little bit. It's a little bit better. So it's a 20. The more you do this, the slower it gets, unfortunately. But you can see it's expanding the area around that collision. It's kind of like resizing with Pyro. It does it based on where the particles exist, but if you want it to go ahead a little more, then you may need to do that. Yeah, just merely turn that back to normal. It's interesting that, yeah, that set of fast moving colliders is actually worse. So I don't know what the deal is there. Let's also have a look. What else have we got here? Particle motion, behavior, use friction and bounce, volume motion, collisions, surface extrapolation. So you could try doing this. This is like basically the amount of velocity from the collision surface that's going to be imparted onto the particles. And by increasing that, you could potentially get them to follow along with the collision a little more. But still, you know, a lot of leaking going on. Now, I took my substeps way back as well, which potentially, you know, is not a good idea. So let's see if increasing that again makes it work any better. A little bit better. So you may just need to crank that up to the point that it, yeah, it kind of works. But yeah, so with flip, I find the best thing to do is to try and get just a more solid collision. So maybe what we can do, this may be tricky, but let's try this. I'm gonna isolate the wood here. So I can just do that by double clicking. And really the problem is only these back ones, not really the front ones, but whoops. I guess I'll just do that. I won't worry about the front ones for now, I'll just do those. And then I don't want to do it on the inside though, so I'm kind of thinking maybe I can isolate the front faces, but I'm going to do it based on normal. So I'm going to change this spread angle and see if I can see how that kind of allows me to select a little section like that. I'm hoping that I might be able to do it. There we go, look at that. That's pretty good. That worked well. I might just create a group instead of using a blast. Create a group, I'll call this front. And then I'm going to poly extrude this out. But I'm going to do it based on point normal. Maybe. Yeah, it's not too bad. But see, it's giving me this nice kind of really thick exterior wall. But I want to apply it just to the front group. There we go. Look at that. And then, so I'll take this blast and do the opposite over here. 3 minutes to go. And then merge that. Now it's going to kind of go through those bits of barrel, but that's kind of okay. You know, should be alright. At a certain point too, this is an animated collision shape. It's deforming geometry inside the .NET, so we could potentially just turn this down to 0 or switch it out at a certain point as well if it works, but then we want to turn it off past a certain point. We could just kind of maybe do that. So let's take a look at the collision guide for that now. And now we should have like a really thick volume in that area. Hopefully it doesn't just shoot those particles to the other side of that volume. We're getting some shooting out that side now, which is interesting. Curses. Didn't quite work. Yeah, look, they're just kind of leaking out. Maybe it would be better to have a more simplified collision where you don't have, you just do the wood. So it's like, you know, you just have that stuff. Let me turn that off, there we go. And you don't have any of the other parts. And you just work with that, maybe the top pieces as well. Okay. What if we delete everything but those, and then do a VDB from those? Oh, well, whoops. I guess do that over here. Okay. So yeah, I don't know. You know, I'm not sure. It's definitely possible, but it does take a lot of playing around with. And that's why this technique of, you know, just purely relying on the collision to give you the result that you are after is not necessarily always the best solution, because it just can be really difficult. Hey Hardik, how you going? Good morning. So yeah, you know, often you know, when we're doing these things, we'll sort of fake that behavior just because it is way easier to fake it than to do it for real. And it takes, you know, it takes you, not that I've been doing it for that long, only 20 minutes, but you can see it's much more problematic and much harder. So it creates all these issues that you have to solve. Whereas maybe if when the pieces of the box separate, then I put in like a big spray of flip to make it look like this is bursting out with fluid. You know, maybe that would work better. And then you don't need like 12 sub-steps, and it's just a little bit easier to control. So you have to think about those things as well. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'll keep playing with it and see if I can get something working. I don't know if I'm going to keep going with this week. Next week, I might finish it off and just leave this one and then work on something else. But it's you know, it's been a fun project to work on. Oh, I forgot to show you. I did a render after last week's session as well. And this was kind of what I got to after I changed the amount of fragments in the cloth. I did this, and arguably it's pretty shredded now. It looks like maybe there's a little too much fracturing going on, but there's some cool things happening. So yeah, the Kitbash shaders need a bit of love. Yeah, they're all a bit kind of weird and washed out, and I had to create a new shader for the cloth because that one just wasn't working. But yeah, I was pretty happy with how this is turning out. Obviously needs a lot of polish, but I think as a kind of experimental simulation with lots of different things, it's kind of it's a fun little result. Once I get those birds flying around as well, wow, look out. Cool. Well, I'm out of time, sorry to say. It's 12 o'clock here, time for me to get some lunch. Thanks, Sebastian. Well, thank you for joining me, everybody. Remember, next week, for anyone that wasn't here at the start, I've just gone into daylight savings, so I may be streaming an hour earlier than I was previously. But it's at 10 o'clock Australian time every Monday, whatever that means to you. And yeah, I'll see you guys next week, and we'll work on something else. I think I'll show you where I got to with this. I'll play around with it a little more, see if I can get some of that fluid happening. But yeah, I'll see you guys next week, and we'll do something else. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Alan. Thanks, Keegan. Thanks for joining me. See you guys next week. Have a good week, everybody. Talk to you soon.